The flagpole outside the Canadian Embassy in Brussels carries two flags at sunrise, the maple leaf at the top, snapping in a cold November wind off the North Sea. Below it, by exactly 1 meter, the circle of 12 gold stars on a deep blue field that has flown over every European capital for 60 years. Not as a courtesy, not as a diplomatic gesture for a visiting dignitary, as a permanent installation. The embassy gardener, a Belgian man named Henri, who has tended that compound for 31 years through 6 Canadian ambassadors, said something to a Reuters photographer at 6 in the morning that no embassy staff member at any Canadian mission in Europe has ever said on the record before. He said, "I have raised one flag here every morning for 3 decades. Today, I raised 2, and the second one is not coming down. I do not know what you call this country anymore. I know what it has become." That is the sound of a $47 billion realignment. And it began with a single sentence spoken at a podium in Strasbourg. The setting was the European Parliament's plenary chamber on a Tuesday morning, the kind of formal session reserved for moments the European institutions wanted to mark with permanence. A reporter from a Brussels-based financial publication asked the European Commission president a careful, technical question about the framework agreement that had been finalized between the European Union and Canada over the preceding 7 months, asking specifically whether the depth of the integration, the harmonized regulatory standards, the unified procurement access, the joint critical minerals reserve, the coordinated tariff retaliation mechanisms, the synchronized financial market access amounted to something different from a trade deal. The Commission president paused. She set down her notes. She looked directly at the camera. She said, "Canada is no longer simply a trading partner of the European Union. As of today, Canada participates in 26 of the 28 regulatory frameworks that define our internal market. Canada has joined our critical raw materials reserve. Canada has accepted reciprocal financial passporting under conditions equivalent to a member state. Canada has aligned its agricultural standards with ours. Canada has joined our joint procurement mechanism for defense, pharmaceuticals, and clean energy. We have 27 member states formally. Today, in every operational sense that matters to the citizens and businesses of our union, we have 28. Canada is the 28th state of the European Union in all but name. We welcome them." She paused and then added the second line, the line that traveled around the world inside 90 minutes. She said, "This was not our initiative. Canada came to us. We simply said yes faster than we have ever said yes to anyone. 28th state, welcomed faster than ever." These were not the words of careful diplomatic ambiguity. They were the words of an institution that had finished negotiating and was now announcing the result. They were the words of a continent that had spent 18 months watching the largest economy in North America insult its second largest economy and had decided quietly and deliberately to make an offer that the insulted partner could not refuse. They were the words of a Europe that had been waiting for 30 years for exactly this opening and had moved through it the moment it appeared. Within 4 hours, the response from Washington came, not from the State Department, not from the Office of the United States Trade Representative, from the president himself standing on the South Lawn before boarding a helicopter. He shouted over the rotor wash, "Canada," he said, "joining Europe. Give me a break. They cannot join Europe. They are not in Europe. Geographically, look at a map. Carney is playing games. He thinks he can scare us. He cannot scare us. The European Union is overrated, very overrated. They have been falling apart for 20 years. They have no military. They have no energy. They have no growth. They have nothing. And Carney wants to tie his country to that? Fine, let him. We do not need Canada. We never needed Canada. They should be grateful we ever traded with them in the first place. By Tuesday, we will have replaced everything we used to get from Canada with American suppliers, American workers, American everything. By Tuesday, he went further. The press corps could hear the second remark over the engines because he leaned back toward the microphones before climbing the helicopter steps. Carney thinks Europe is his lifeboat. Europe is a sinking ship. He just tied himself to a sinking ship. Good luck to him. Good luck to all of them. We are America. We do not need any of them. The Canadian response was not delivered by Carney. It was delivered by markets, by procurement officers, by industrial purchasing departments, by the quiet machinery of integrated economies recalibrating in real time across 2 continents. Within 72 hours, the replacement test for the American position began. It failed in 4 sectors simultaneously. In Cleveland, Ohio, a major American steel producer that had been the largest single supplier of structural steel to Canadian infrastructure projects for 30 years, received formal notification from 12 Canadian construction firms that future structural steel procurement would be sourced under the new European Union Joint Procurement Framework, drawing primarily from mills in Germany, Italy, and Sweden. The chief executive of the Cleveland producer, a 4th-generation steel man named Gene, who had spent 41 years inside the same company that his great-grandfather had founded, sat at his desk and read the 12 letters in sequence. He did not call his board. He did not call his communications team. He walked out onto the mill floor at the start of the day shift and asked his shift superintendent to call the workers together. He stood on a steel grating above the casting line. He told 340 people, without notes, that the orders that had paid their wages for 30 years had just gone to Europe. He told them he did not know what to say. He told them he had voted for the administration every time. He told them he was sorry. A welder near the back of the crowd, an American with 26 years on that floor, told a Cleveland newspaper reporter the next day, he stood up there and he cried, "I have known Gene for 2 decades. I have never seen that man's voice break. Today it broke." He did not break because he lost the orders. He broke because he knew we were not getting them back. In Houston, Texas, a major American oil field services company that had been the dominant supplier of completion equipment to Canadian offshore and Arctic projects discovered that its 3 largest Canadian customers had jointly signed new long-term supply agreements with Norwegian and Italian providers under the new European Union framework. The Houston company's chief financial officer flew to Calgary the following Monday to attempt to renegotiate. She returned to Houston on Wednesday afternoon. She told her board that there was nothing to renegotiate. The Canadian companies had not chosen European suppliers because the European suppliers were cheaper. They had chosen them because the European suppliers came packaged with regulatory harmonization, financial passporting, joint warranty coverage, and a Brussels-backed dispute resolution mechanism that the American suppliers could not match. The board canceled a planned expansion of a Texas manufacturing facility the following morning. The expansion would have employed 920 workers in the Houston metropolitan area. In Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, an American paper and pulp mill that had supplied Canadian publishing, packaging, and printing industries for over a century received simultaneous cancellation notices from 43 Canadian buyers. The Canadian buyers had joined a European Union procurement cooperative that pooled paper and pulp purchases across all 28 participating economies, drawing primarily from Finnish, Swedish, and Portuguese mills. The Sault Ste. Marie mill manager, a man named Daniel, who had grown up in a house 3 blocks from the mill and whose father had retired from the same operation, taped a single sheet of paper to the bulletin board outside the lunchroom on Friday morning. It was a list of the 43 canceled accounts. He did not write anything underneath it. He did not need to. The mill workers walked past the list on their way to the cafeteria for 2 days straight before anyone took it down. On the 3rd day, the union shop steward, a Vietnam veteran with 34 years inside the mill, took the sheet off the wall, folded it carefully, and put it in his locker. He told a local radio interviewer that night, "I am keeping that paper. My grandchildren are going to ask me one day how this happened. I am going to show them that piece of paper. I am going to tell them men in suits in Washington said words they should not have said about people who used to buy what we made. And then the people who used to buy what we made went somewhere else." That is the whole story. 43 names on a sheet of paper. In Buffalo, New York, the cross-border financial services corridor that had moved capital between American banks and Canadian institutional investors for a century began routing through Frankfurt and Amsterdam under the new financial passporting arrangements. A vice president at a major American regional bank, a woman with 22 years of cross-border experience named Marie, whose father had worked the same corridor before her, told a New York banking newsletter the Canadian pension funds, the Canadian insurance carriers, the Canadian sovereign wealth equivalents, they are now executing through Frankfurt. They are not punishing us. They are not boycotting us. They are simply using the new framework because it works. The new framework is European. We are not in it. We will not be in it for a generation, if ever. I have spent my career building the bridge that was just bypassed. I am not angry. I am tired. There is a difference. The numbers spread quickly. The integration was deeper and wider than the initial press briefings had suggested. Canada had joined the European Union's critical raw materials framework, granting European industrial purchasers preferred access to Canadian rare earth, lithium, cobalt, nickel, uranium, and potash output under price corridors fixed for 15 years. Canada had joined the European Union's Joint Defence Procurement Mechanism, allowing Canadian defence contractors to bid as domestic suppliers on European military programs estimated at €310 billion over the next decade. Canada had accepted reciprocal financial passporting, allowing Canadian banks, insurers, and pension funds to operate across the European single market under home country regulation and allowing European institutions equivalent access to Canadian markets. Canada had harmonized its agricultural and food safety standards with European Union baselines, opening unrestricted access for Canadian wheat, canola, pulses, pork, and beef to all 27 European member states under common regulatory treatment. Canada had joined the European Union's pharmaceutical joint procurement system. Canada had aligned its automotive emissions and safety standards with European Union baselines, opening reciprocal market access for vehicles built to either set of specifications. Canada had committed to a synchronized tariff retaliation mechanism, agreeing to mirror European Union trade measures against any third country that imposed tariffs on either party. This is not a temporary fluctuation. This is a structural realignment. It has been building for 30 years, ever since the original Canada-European Union Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement was negotiated, sitting underused for nearly a decade while Canadian governments waited for an opening. The opening was provided by 18 months of insults from Washington. The expansion of the original framework from a trade agreement into something approaching membership was drafted, reviewed, and pre-cleared in Ottawa and Brussels over the preceding 9 months, sitting in a folder marked only with a date field, waiting for the moment the political conditions made the announcement land with maximum effect. The political conditions arrived, the folder opened, then came the human stories. In Quebec City, a software engineer named Pierre had spent 11 years working remotely for a financial technology firm headquartered in Boston. The firm had offered him 3 promotions over a decade, each requiring relocation to Massachusetts. He had turned them all down. His parents lived in a house on the Rue Saint-Jean. His daughter attended a school 4 blocks from his apartment. He went to a brasserie near the Plains of Abraham every Friday night with 3 friends he had known since university. On the morning of the Strasbourg announcement, his employer informed him that all Canadian-based employees would, as of the following quarter, be transferred to a newly established European operating entity headquartered in Dublin. His salary would be paid in euros. His benefits would be administered under European standards. He would, for purposes of employment law, social security coordination, and tax residency, become a person whose professional life ran through the European Union. He did not have to leave Quebec. The European Union had come to him. He told a Radio Canada interviewer in French, voice quiet, "I did not move. The world moved. I am still in my apartment. I am still walking my daughter to school. I am still going to the brasserie on Friday nights. But my work is European now. My company is European now." The man on television last year called my country a sideshow. Today, my country is in a room he is not allowed to enter. I am not angry. I am amazed. In Halifax, Nova Scotia, a port logistics coordinator named Marie had worked the harbor for 19 years. Her grandmother had been a war bride from Liverpool. Her family kept the photographs on a sideboard in her dining room. On the morning of the announcement, the container terminal where she had spent 2 decades sorting bills of lading received notification that the volume of European container traffic transiting Halifax was projected to triple over the next 4 years under the new framework, with corresponding expansions to terminal capacity, rail intermodal connections, and customs clearance staff. Marie's supervisor, a man named Steph, who had been a longshoreman for 37 years before moving into operations, gathered the day shift in the break room and announced that the port would be hiring an additional 480 workers over the next 30 months. Marie told a CBC reporter, "My grandmother came here from Liverpool on a ship in 1946. She told me when I was a little girl that we were a country that faced the Atlantic. She said one day the Atlantic would come back to us. I did not understand what she meant. I think I understand it now. The man in Washington called us replaceable. He has replaced us with nothing because there is nothing to replace us with. The Europeans understood. They came across the ocean. My grandmother was right. The political fractures inside the United States did not come from the opposition party. They came from inside the president's own coalition. 4 major American industry associations representing manufacturing, agriculture, financial services, and energy issued a joint statement within 5 days of the Strasbourg announcement. The statement did not use the president's name. The statement read, "The economic relationship between the United States and Canada has been the largest, deepest, and most successful bilateral commercial relationship in human history. The events of the past 18 months have placed that relationship under unprecedented strain. The announcement from Strasbourg represents a structural realignment of Canadian economic orientation that will, in the absence of immediate corrective action, become permanent within a single political cycle. We call upon the administration to immediately restore respectful, constructive, and stable dialogue with the Government of Canada. Skill is not defined by a passport. Reliability is not measured in slogans. Friendship has a limit." 7 American governors, 4 Republicans, and 3 Democrats, all representing states with significant cross-border trade exposure, sent a joint letter to the White House requesting emergency restoration of the bilateral relationship. One of those governors, a Republican who had endorsed the administration twice, stood on the steps of his state capitol and spoke without notes. He said, "I have a state economy that depends on Canadian trade. I have factories that depend on Canadian inputs. I have farmers who depend on Canadian buyers. I have banks that depend on Canadian capital. I did not endorse insulting them. I did not endorse calling them overrated. I did not endorse driving them into the arms of Europe. I am asking the president plainly to repair what has been broken. My state needs it. America needs it." Calling Canada the 28th state of the European Union did not make it so. America's behavior made it so. The Europeans simply showed up. The cost estimates climbed for 4 straight weeks. A coalition of American economic analysts projected that the diversion of Canadian trade, investment, procurement, and capital flows toward the European Union framework would cost the American economy approximately $47 billion in the first year, expanding to nearly $200 billion cumulatively over 5 years if the realignment was not reversed. $47 billion because a delegation never sent, a negotiation never opened, a respect never offered, a friendship never repaired. Beyond the dollar figures, something deeper had shifted, something that ran below the level of trade columns and stock tickers. The Strasbourg announcement had ended an assumption. The assumption had been that Canada was permanent, that Canada had nowhere else to go. That Canada was, in the natural order of things, attached to the United States the way a younger sibling is attached to an older one, by geography, by language, by habit, by the absence of alternatives. The Strasbourg announcement ended that assumption. Canada had somewhere else to go. Canada had been quietly building the somewhere else for a generation. Canada had walked through the door the moment Washington held it open with its own words. The president said the European Union was overrated. Brussels just absorbed the second largest economy in North America. The president said Carney was tying his country to a sinking ship. The ship was sailing and the American economy was watching it leave from the shore. The president said he would replace Canadian suppliers by Tuesday. By Tuesday, the Canadian suppliers had been replaced inside Canada itself by European suppliers under a framework Washington had not even known was finalized. The president said Canada should be grateful. Canada was instead applauded by a continent in a chamber on a Tuesday morning in Strasbourg. He tried to make Canada small. Canada became continental. He tried to call Canada overrated. Canada was rated, formally, as the 28th state of the European Union in every operational dimension that mattered. He tried to humiliate Canada. The humiliation arrived at the South Lawn instead, paid in canceled contracts in Cleveland, frozen expansions in Houston, taped lists in Sault Ste. Marie, bypassed corridors in Buffalo, and a $47 billion invoice that would grow year by year while the second flag continued to fly outside the Canadian Embassy in Brussels, 1 meter below the maple leaf, refusing every morning at sunrise to come down. Please hit the bell icon and subscribe my channel for daily updates.